Hello, my name is Aaron Gallegos, and today I will be presenting on the social issue of the death penalty. This topic is one of the most controversial issues in the United States and around the world because it involves questions of justice, morality, human rights, and government power. In this presentation, I will explain what the death penalty is, I will provide historical background, use a sociological perspective to examine its impact, and then discuss 3 arguments in support of the death penalty and 3 arguments against it. Finally, I'm going to share my own personal opinion on the issue and explain why it matters to society. The goal of the presentation is not to convince people to agree with one side, but to understand why the death penalty continues to be debated today. Okay, so I'm going to go over the definition of the social issue. The death penalty, also known as capital punishment, is a government-sanctioned punishment in which a person is executed for committing a serious crime, usually murder. In the United States, capital punishment it is regulated by federal and state laws and applied in limited circumstances. While some people view the death penalty as justice, others kind of see it as a violation of human rights. The difference in perspective is what makes the death penalty such a powerful and ongoing debate in this society. Capital punishment, it is considered a social issue because it affects individuals, families, communities, and society as a whole. It raises important questions about whether the government should have the authority to take a person's life as punishment, even when that person has committed a serious crime. Now I'm going to give some historical context behind this. The death penalty has a long history in the United States, and it kind of dates back to the colonial times, when executions were common for a wide range of crimes. And over time, public attitudes towards these punishments begin to change, especially as the concerns grow about the fairness and the discrimination. So in 1972, the Supreme Court, Furman versus Georgia, it temporarily halted executions due to unfair applications. However, in 1976, Gregg versus Georgia, it allowed the death penalty to return under new legal guidelines. It was meant to make sentencing more fair, and it is the ones we have today. Now we're going to go behind the sociological imagination. So using this, it helps us understand how the death penalty affects both individuals and the society. On an individual level, the death penalty affects the families of victims who may seek justice or closure, as well as the families of those sentenced to death who experience loss and trauma. On the societal level, we can go reflect values about justice, morality, race, inequality, and government power. It shows how laws are shaped by political beliefs, cultural norms, and power structures. The issue also highlights concerns about race, class, and access to legal resources within the justice system. By using the sociological imagination, we can see that the death penalty is not just about individual crimes, but about how society chooses to respond to crime. So now we are going to be going into the pros and the cons of the death penalty. So for our first pro, it's going to be the justice for the victims. One of these arguments is in favor of the death penalty is that it provides justice for the victims and their families. Supporters believe that when someone commits a horrific crime such as murder, the most severe punishment is appropriate. Some families of victims feel that execution brings a sense of closure or finality that life imprisonment cannot provide. They may believe that the punishment fits the crime and the justice has truly been served. The argument is often based on emotional and moral reasoning, emphasizing accountability and punishment for the worst offenses. This is also the most extreme reason for wanting and supporting the death penalty. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. It's going to be our pro number 2. and this is to prevent future crimes and to prevent the repeat offenses. So another argument in support of the death penalty is that it prevents future crimes. Supporters argue that once an offender is executed, they can never harm another person again. This argument focuses on more public safety and the idea that execution permanently removes dangerous individuals from society. Some of these supporters also believe that the death penalty discourages other people from committing similar crimes, although the point is heavily debated. For those who support this view, the death penalty is seen as a way to protect society from repeat offenders. So you can get it from here. Executed offenders cannot commit future crimes. Supporters argue this guarantees public safety. And according to proponents, the death penalty guarantees that convicted murderers will never be able to commit additional crimes, therefore permanently banning and protecting society. And this is from Britannica Editors 2025. You can see this kind of just sums up everything I said within the slide. So we will be moving to the next pro, which is moral retribution. This is the third argument in favor of the death penalty, and it is moral retribution. Some of the people that believe in this, they believe that people who commit extreme crimes forfeit their right to live. So basically, this just means the death penalty is seen as a morally justified response to serious wrongdoing, and supporters often argue that justice requires punishment that is proportional to the crime committed. So this argument is kind of just closely tied to more personal beliefs about morality, responsibility, and the role of punishment in society. So you can see here, kind of just to sum it up, some people believe that these people who commit extreme crimes forfeit the right to live, as I just said. Execution is viewed as morally justified punishment, and advocates claim that individuals who commit heinous crimes forfeit the right to live, and execution is viewed as a morally justified form of retribution. So just to sum it all up, this is our last pro. On to the cons. So for our first con, we have risk of wrongful execution. Some may say that this is controversial, and usually the trials are lengthy for this purpose. But there is evidence and main arguments against the death penalty. So it is a risk of executing innocent people. Over the years, individuals on death row have been killed due to new evidence, including DNA testing. Because the death penalty is irreversible, any mistakes made during the justice system, it results in permanent harm, and there's no do-overs. Critics argue that no legal system is perfect, and the possibility of error makes capital punishment too dangerous to use. This concern has led people to oppose the death penalty entirely, believing that life imprisonment is a safer alternative. However, the justice system usually proves that they are guilty, rather not. So that is our first con, the risk of wrongful execution. You can see here my main points is that opponents argue that the death penalty risks executing innocent people, noting that multiple death row inmates have been exonerated through DNA evidence and new investigations. On to our con number 2. We have racial and economic bias. So this is also another controversial argument, and it is used against the death penalty, and it is stated that it is applied unfairly. Research and statistics show that racial minorities and people from lower income backgrounds are more likely to receive death sentences. Defendants who cannot afford experienced legal representation are also at a disadvantage, which is completely true. This raises concerns about whether justice is truly equal for everyone. Critics argue that the death penalty reflects systematic inequalities within the criminal justice system rather than fair punishment, which also can be true. So, again, we're just going to go over some of these bullet points that I went ahead and provided. So, critics state that the death penalty is applied disproportionately to racial minorities and individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, revealing systemic bias within the criminal justice system. The quality of legal representation impacts sentencing outcomes, which again I went over, and can possibly lead to poor representation and poor sentencing. On to con number 3. So for our third con, we have here cruel, inhumane, and costly. So what I mean by this is that opponents of the death penalty argue that it is cruel and inhumane. That many believe that execution violates basic human rights and dignity. And in addition, death penalty cases often cost more than life imprisonment because of lengthy trials, appeals, and legal procedures. Critics argue that these resources could be better allocated for crime prevention and rehabilitation programs. This argument focuses on both ethical and practical concerns surrounding capital punishment. So we can go ahead and kind of sum this up into saying that the death penalty is cruel. It is cruel, and the amount of money spent from the government financial aid that's being provided can be better allocated to different programs. So right here I put opponents argue executions violate human rights and that death penalty cases often cost more than life imprisonment. Those opposed to capital punishment argue that it is cruel and inhumane and the death penalty cases cost more than life imprisonments due to lengthy trials and appeals. In my personal opinion, I am against the death penalty because it is an irreversible punishment and there is always a possibility that innocent people could be executed. I chose a social issue because it involves life, death, morality, and the power of the government, making it one of the most serious and controversial issues in society. The death penalty matters to society because it reveals deeper problems within the criminal justice system, including racial inequality, economic disadvantage, and unequal access to quality legal representation. Society should care about this issue because justice should be focused on fairness, accountability, and protecting human rights rather than relying on punishments that cannot be undone. And I am not saying this because I am for murder, but I am for life. There is not 100%, there's a chance that someone may have not committed the crime. There is a chance that the person can be rehabilitated. Justice is often confused with, I would say, more vengeance. People rely on the more fact of punishment during these times of crisis instead of fairness and thinking rationally. And during these times, emotional states are the highest. So I believe that the death penalty should be revised. I chose this topic because it forces society to kind of confront difficult questions about justice, immorality, and government power. The death penalty matters because it exposes inequalities within the justice system and challenges the idea of equal treatment under the law. We should care about this issue because the way we punish crime reflects our values as a society. If justice is meant to protect human rights and fairness, then it is important to reconsider punishments that are permanent and irreversible. And thank you once again for watching my presentation. I hope you considered my points and got my research. Thank you again for listening. Bye bye.